All right, well, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar titled From Conceptual to Practical, Applying Predictive to Your Everyday Marketing Programs, presented by Mintigo and Demand Gen. I'm Doug Ramsey, Senior Marketing Specialist here at Mintigo, and I'll be your moderator for this session. So today I'm really excited to be joined by two super insightful and experienced speakers. First, we have Gail Morag, VP of Partners at Mintigo. And Gail has over 20 years experience spanning 3 continents, leading partner and customer success organizations where she helped companies translate data into actionable insights and then turn these insights into marketing and sales programs. We're also joined by Gaia Connery, a consultant at Demand Gen, where she helps organizations get the most out of their MarTech investments while meeting their marketing objectives. She's held roles in a broad array of marketing and consulting capacities over her 15-year career, working with hundreds of organizations in the process. So now let's go over the agenda real quick for today. So first, we're going to start off with an overview of the transformation of sales and marketing organizations through predictive and artificial intelligence. Moreover, we're going to discuss how these technologies can help you discover your true ideal customer profile, or ICP. Then we'll see how this tech can help drive results across the entire customer life cycle. Next, we'll dive into operational successes with predictive and AI through use cases. So we'll start to talk about assessing an organization's current standing, including the creation of company benchmarks. Then we'll get into real-world applications of predictive, including what to expect when applying your predictive models. And we'll also discuss the importance of getting both sales and marketing aligned and on the same page. And to conclude, we'll run through a checklist of the things that you can do to prepare for implementing predictive in your organization. So before we begin, just a couple of quick housekeeping items. So the slides and recording are going to be sent out via email after the webinar, typically in 1 to 2 days. And if you would like to reach out on social, our Twitter handles are @Mintigo and @DemandGen. And if you have any questions, just go ahead and please type them into the chat box, and we'll try our best to answer them in our Q&A. And so without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and hand the mic over to Gail.
Good morning, everyone, and happy Wednesday. Thank you for joining us today. So I'll discuss mainly the conceptual side of applying predictive to your marketing and sales programs, and Gaia will take over and talk later about the practical side. So conceptually, there is no doubt that organizations investing in AI competence today will be the dominant players for decades to come, right? AI and digital transformation are today one of the most strategic subjects to tackle. Analysts talk about, and you see it here, Forrester, Gartner, McKinsey, talk about the tremendous value it brings, right? Not only in operational efficiency, but also unveiling previously unseen business and revenue opportunities. We are also super happy, and also from our perspective, it is incredible to see the value that applying predictive unlocks. In the recent example of one of our customers, Visible, their mission was to grow faster, using predictive as a foundation for this strategy to assess their total available market and who they should focus on. They implemented Mintigo for the automatic selection of accounts, account prioritization to optimize their SDR outbound outreach, and then arming their SDRs with the data they need to have a meaningful conversation. And the results that we saw together were tremendous. We were able to see a tremendous improvement in the conversion rate. It's a 6-fold for for those accounts that are ranked A, and also 40% increase in the ASP. So really, when you target the right person at the right time, within the right company with a need for your solution, you see that the conversion rates are way higher and the ASP as well. So how do we do that? And what is really predictive analytics? And how does it work, right? It starts from the data. It starts from the data that you have in your marketing automation or your CRM, and then basically augmenting your data with the Mintigo global database. So with all these third-party data points around companies, such as what type of technologies are they using, what type of hiring are they doing, what type of intent or research are they doing online, all these data points that really help you assess what is your ICP and how to discuss or approach a specific account. All these data points are passing through predictive models, through a machine learning process. Now figure out first, what are the main features or the main signals that are relevant for your specific business, which is really the ideal customer profile. And then when understanding that, being able to score and prioritize and provide the insights for each account or each lead, and then use it even for ABM, segmentation, and discovering accounts that you didn't even think that fit your business, and you can give value into that. And all that process happens in the back end where all these models are working for you and introducing predictive scores and the predictive insights into your systems, if it's your Marketo, your Eloqua, or your Salesforce and the CRM. So this is basically how it works. And you will want to apply that to any of the business questions that you have, whether it is, I want to understand who my customer is. I want to know how to prioritize my accounts and my leads, and not using a rule-based prioritization, but using predictive prioritization that takes into account all the data points that we talked before. How can I create retention programs and make sure that my customers will not churn, or figure out which of the customers will churn? All these different data and use cases are what our customers are implementing as part of their predictive analytics journey. So given all these concepts, why not all companies embrace predictive and AI as their best friend? Or really the question for you guys, and I assume a lot of our customers are here, is how do I really unlock the full potential of using Mintigo or any other predictive solution and get the value that we discussed before, that all the analysts are talking about, right? And this is where I called Gaia. She is a senior consultant in Demand Gen. And Demand Gen is a company that actually partners with probably a lot of you here on the call to figure out how to empower your people, your systems, your processes to get results out of this journey. And so without further ado, I would pass to this handle to Gaia to discuss how you take all these concepts of predictive and the different use cases and implement them in real life and in a practical way. And it's clear that the benefits don't happen with words alone, right? You need to be committed to changing your end-to-end process, your culture, your competencies, and even the metrics that you're using to realize the value. So Gaia, to you.
All right. Thank you, Gail. This is Gaia. I don't need to introduce myself again, but I'm kind of playing the practical side here in our conversation today. So Gail, I wanted to ask you, there are a lot of different opportunities here for marketers. Do you have any recommendations for an easy place where they might get started to test out the power of predictive?
Well, typically what our customers would do will start from a very kind of low-hanging fruit use case, either augmenting their existing lead scoring, which is typically rule-based in the systems, with a predictive lead scoring that would take all this third-party data and would translate it into a score and a prioritization. Other would use it typically with an ABM context where they do not totally depend on the data they have in their systems, but actually use mostly the data we have in Mintigo to figure out what accounts to target and how to target these accounts. So this is where typically I would recommend our customers to start because these are, in most cases, the low-hanging fruits.
Yep. All right. Well, that is a perfect segue into some of the things I'm going to cover. So today I would like to talk about that practical approach to predictive analytics. So at Demand Gen, we help a lot of our clients to go a step further with predictive, with scoring, with rating, those different use cases that Gail talked through. The technology is very powerful, but what you do with it is really where you're going to see the most success. So just starting out to reiterate what Gail was saying, kind of where are you today? So with that crawl approach, many of our clients have a marketing automation platform in place, and they have implemented lead scoring. For some of these organizations, it tends to be a bit of a, well, we have it, we're in good shape, set it and forget it mentality. And they don't necessarily go back periodically to take a good look at how well that is working for them. So one of the first things that we like to help clients with is to really understand what are the KPIs that we should be looking at from our predictive and benchmarking so we can demonstrate improvement over time. So I've listed out here some of the metrics that answer typical business questions that Predictive is trying to solve. And I'll show you just a few examples here in a moment of some of the outcomes that we've seen. But really thinking just about looking at that distribution of ratings. So you implement Predictive, you're trying to determine which are our priority contacts, right? We want to make sure that we're applying the right resources, the right message. So making sure that the distribution of ratings, whatever that rating scale is that you use, A through E or so on, that's healthy, that we're seeing a good distribution there. We're also seeing that the volume is healthy, right? We want to make sure that that's not increasing or decreasing substantially, especially for the team that's receiving these customers and taking action on them. We also want to look, again, going back to outcomes, at conversion rate. So we're seeing that the customers or the prospects that we're passing over to that receiving team are converting those forward. A predictive model is trying to assess the likelihood of movement towards a target event, if you will, whether that is the start of a buyer's journey or all the way to closed won. So we want to see that the conversion to that event is actually healthy. And then lastly, velocity. So are we seeing that those qualified leads are moving more quickly? The higher rated ones are moving more quickly than the lower rated ones. So a few charts here to illustrate. We've worked with a number of clients that have a rules-based marketing automation lead scoring program that are starting to pursue Predictive. And what you can see here in this example is fairly typical of what we see. So in the top chart, you can see for opportunities 1, the distribution there for the predictive model is a little bit healthier than just a rules-based model. So we've got a nice blend of A's, B's, C's, and D's, whereas the rules-based model is a little bit more skewed. But the more interesting metric is in the bottom chart with the opportunity amount 1, where you can see comparing the rules-based versus the predictive. The A's and B's for the predictive model are returning significantly more revenue than the rules-based model. So these kinds of assessments really help clients to get numbers around what is happening in their scoring, their rating, however they're doing that, and think about what's my next best step here.
And Gaia, do you always see these kind of results when analyzing clients' models?
We do actually, Gail. We almost always see that predictive outpaces rules-based for almost all KPIs. And we also work with clients to decide, well, should we go fully predictive or should we think about a hybrid model? Should we use predictive as part of a rules-based model? But even so, we almost always see that predictive outpaces just rules-based. All right, so moving on. So I'm going to talk through a particular case study here. I'm not going to mention the client by name, but just to tell you a little bit about them. They're a large organization. They serve both B2B and B2C subscription sales for their thousands of customers. And what they really wanted to answer using Predictive was which customers merit higher value touches to drive the most business. We have thousands of customers. We have a limited number of resources that can reach out to touch those folks, and obviously a finite number of hours in the day. So you're making sure that we're applying the right resources, the right messages to the right audience is a use case where Mintigo and other predictive vendors really sing. So what this client had in place when we first started working with them was actually a pretty sophisticated application of Mint2Go. So just to talk through a little bit of what they were doing, they're focused very much on their customers, and they had 4 Mint2Go models to predict the likelihood of those customers to either grow or decline or to churn, so to actually lose a customer, or to win back. So they might have lost a customer and they were trying to win them back, to bring them back as a customer. Some of their models were predictive only. Some were a hybrid of predictive and rules-based, and they had segmented their entire customer database against each of these 4 models and ran it on a weekly cadence. So any of those high scores using those predictive models were then automatically created as new leads in the reps' CRM queues. So it sounds like a very practical, very sophisticated approach to applying predictive, but what they were finding was in fact not the best results. It started out strong, but over time the marketing team started seeing a huge lead backlog and hearing a lot of negative feedback from the reps about the quality of the leads, which just started a lot of questions trying to understand what was going on. Some of the things that they were seeing that one particular customer might actually be scoring high in more than one model. And this was happening in fairly quick fashion, that one customer could be a grower and a couple weeks later be a decliner. So the sales team was not very happy with the output from this implementation and really felt like marketing was just throwing a lot of stuff at them, creating additional work, and not enabling efficiencies. So they brought demand gen in. It's always a good idea to bring in an unbiased third party to help diagnose issues like this. And so we did a lot of discovery interviews. We reviewed a lot of documentation. We looked under the hood of the systems. And what we found was rather interesting. Even with all these models, these very sophisticated Mint2Go models, none of the models had any knowledge of each other. There were no linkages. And the way that the sales team actually looked at segmentation was different from the way that the marketing organization looked at segmentation. So we had a lot of silos, and we had a lot of misalignment all the way through in terms of service level agreements, KPIs, and ultimately just a low trust of the predictive models because there was limited understanding in how they worked. Right? Some of the information that Gail ran through early on in this presentation, it just felt like a black box and one that really wasn't functioning very well for the sales organization that was receiving these leads. So we took a slightly different approach in how we worked with the team, both on their overall lead management framework, but also how they were implementing Mint2Go. And what you see here is how we unfolded our solution to continue to help them unlock the power of predictive of Mint2Go, but in a fashion that the sales team really felt like the marketing organization was working with them and that there was good alignment and good communication. So we implemented a number of communication streams and committees and make sure that folks understood what we were doing, why we were doing, how we were doing it. One of the important things here, too, was to get the sales team back on board with thinking about some quick wins. Right? What could we do that had a fairly low level of effort but high level of impact to get the sales team back on board and aligned? And then that last item there, creating a feedback loop between sales and marketing, really reinforcing their funnel, the stages in the funnel, and who was responsible for doing what and by what time point, and then implementing that in the CRM, so really supporting that with the systems. All right, so I just want to go through a little bit on how we further applied Mint2Go here. So the segmentation that you see at the top there, the ecosystem of kind of a hierarchy of programs drilling into segments and then into status and into individual products, is how we started to chain the different segments that both the marketing and sales organizations agreed upon. And at the bottom, what you can see, we use Mintigo at every step along the way. So we first used Mintigo to understand which accounts, which customer accounts we should assign to an account manager versus those that were unassigned and could self-serve. And then we used Mintigo in the segmentation to help augment that customer data so we could really be sure that we understood what was their vertical, what was their size, and starting to think about messaging that was most specific to who they were. In the status bucket, again, we used Mintigo. We still have those multiple models that I went through earlier, so that would indicate status. But we wouldn't have a situation where a customer could have multiple statuses. And I'll show you in the next slide a diagram of how we achieved that. And then lastly, now we know who this individual is, the level of support we're going to provide, what their particular needs are. With product, now we were determining what was the best solution. What was the product that we should be offering to them? And again, using Mintigo here. So very, very involved. And just to show you quickly, I won't go through this whole diagram, but this is one of my favorite parts of the implementation. In these different bright blue boxes, you can see where the models sit in a decision tree. So rather than having them all run concurrently, we used logic within the marketing automation platform to decide where we wanted to best bucket them, what was the best status. And then you can see at the bottom, we developed these plays. So depending on which status they met in kind of an order of priority, we had documentation for the owner, whether it was sales or they stayed with marketing, to make sure that the right messages were delivered to those customers based on their status. All right, so preparing for predictive. One of the things that I have here at the top, I think, is really key. Predictive, as Gail was saying, many use cases. Spending a little time with the organization and thinking about what is our priority use case. So rather than trying to quote-unquote boil the ocean, really thinking with the team, what are some granular use cases for predictive? And answering the question, if we knew that this customer prospect matched the ideal customer profile based on this model, what would we do? What is our action plan, our resolution plan? So before we even get into the technology and the modeling, thinking about what our use cases and what our action plan is. Firming up your lead management process. So making sure that for every stage in your internal processes, there is clear ownership. So very clear on, for someone who owns a prospect in that stage, what they need to do, what they're expected to do, what the exit criteria are to move a prospect from that stage to the next stage, and by when they need to do it. So making sure that we have really good feedback loops so that we can get to a place where we can do some outcome-based reporting like those KPIs that I showed you at the beginning of my presentation. One of the first steps when you're working with predictive is that you want to find lists of customers that have achieved whatever that target event is, so whatever you're trying to model towards, whether that is entering pipeline or creating revenue, or in the case of customers, likelihood to churn or likelihood to win back. So making sure that in your CRM, it's very easy for you to access the customers that have achieved those target events because your model is going to need that information. Prioritizing the data sources that you're going to need to inform your model, to identify those predictors, and not saying that you need to gather all of the data about everything, but we need to make sure that we have a level of data that Mintigo can use to match so that Mintigo can augment your data with their data. So basic contact information, account information, but then Mintigo can come in and add on with their marketing indicators a wealth of additional information that might not be so easy to find, or even if you find it, that's not the data has not been structured in a way necessarily that you're able to capture it and use it yourself. Next, launching a predictive education roadshow. So trying to get rid of that black box mentality, really helping the organization to understand how predictive works. And then lastly, and most importantly, where I started, benchmarking your KPIs. So making sure that you are thinking about which performance indicators are most important to your business given the particular objectives of the business, and capturing those in a cadence so that you can demonstrate that Mintigo is really returning a lot of value for your business. All right, and that's what I have to cover today. Thank you.
Terrific. Well, thank you guys so much. That was a great presentation. Really appreciate it. Now we'll just take some time for some questions that we've received. So looks like we've got a few of them. This first one I think is good for you, Gail. This person asks, the quality of our organization's data isn't as good as we'd like. Can we still pursue predictive with any success?
So it really depends on what you're trying to achieve. And if this is the case, and if you don't feel comfortable with your data, probably the best approach would be is to build models that would be based mainly on the external data points that Mintigo can bring in. And then you do not totally depend on the data and how clean the data is in your own CRM or marketing automation. As part of the modeling process, Mintigo actually takes care of a lot of the data preparation, cleaning it, matching, and really figuring out which data we can use and which not. So really you can use Mintigo as a way to figure out what doesn't look good in your data and what looks good in your data.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense. Thank you. Looks like we've got one that's probably a good fit for you, Gaia. It says the most valuable, or what's the most valuable step in preparing for predictive, or essentially what step can you not afford to skip or deprioritize?
Yeah, so I'm gonna carry on what Gail was just saying there. Data is very key to your model, but again, I would say don't feel that you have to capture all of the data. The most important data that you need is so that Mintigo can match your data against its data, so that it can augment with those different pieces of information that Gail was mentioning from its own data cloud. And just to echo too what Gail was saying, when we've worked with clients that are creating predictive models, we actually see that probably 90% of the predictors, 90% or better, do come from the predictive vendor like Mintigo. Most of our clients, their data is not in a squeaky clean format as they would like, but as long as you can match to the Mintigo database, then you can be in pretty good shape.
Oh, terrific. That makes sense. And then I think we've got one more here. This will probably be good for you as well, Gaia. What do you think holds marketers back from implementing predictive analytics?
Yeah, I think one of the things I hear most is that the black box mentality. We can't see what's going on, so we don't know if we can trust the output or not. And that, I think, even happens with some of the rules-based lead scoring that the marketing automation vendors provide. But I would say to counter that, if you are doing rules-based lead scoring, making sure that you are helping the organization, especially the recipients of those scored leads, to understand what piece of information are going into that rules-based model and get them socialized around how that works. I think that's an important stepping stone to helping them then understand how predictive works. I would never expect that somebody in the marketing organization is going to become a data scientist and expert on regression modeling, because again, that's where vendors like Mintigo really come in. It's their expertise that is going to help take you to the next level. But getting familiarity around rules-based lead scoring, and then sharing with the organization via something like a roadshow, just a series of a couple webinars to help folks understand a little bit more about what is happening within the predictive modeling process. We're not trying to hide anything here. It's not magic, but just to get them some baseline understanding. Rules-based lead scoring can help a lot there.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Well, with that last question. Oh.
And just to add to that point as well, I think the understanding of the ICP and the ideal customer profile through all these data points that came up as the strongest ones in the model is key to get the confidence of your sales organization and the teams. So the more you expose the model, even though, it's not exactly how the score works, but it's good enough, right? The more you expose that and the more you train and educate, Gaia, what you talked about, the education of the organization on what went into this model, that would create the trust that is needed to go ahead and leverage and get the value of it.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Okay. Well, that makes sense. Well, terrific. That was a great answer. Appreciate it. And I think with that last question answered, I suppose it's time to wrap up. So I just want to say thank you to everyone for joining us. Thank you to our speakers. We appreciate you being here today, and hopefully we'll see you in a future webinar. So thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.